The city of Madison, Wisconsin, was the quintessence of the American dream, where pastel-colored suburban homes stretched as far as the eye could see. Life posed in a meticulously orchestrated routine. At 247 Elm Street, Tony Whitman, a respected doctor at the local hospital, woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning. His wife, Maggie, was an ever-impeccable figure, a dedicated and charming mother. Max, the couple's only child at 8 years old, was the treasure of their eyes. On that Wednesday morning, Tony, hunched over the kitchen table, was reading the latest medical articles on his tablet. Dressed in his flawless white coat, he seemed the very personification of success. "More coffee, dear?" Maggie asked, her voice full of sweetness. She hid her dissatisfaction behind her ever-present smile, but a shadow in her eyes betrayed an inner emptiness. "Yes, please," Tony replied without taking his eyes off the tablet. Maggie served the coffee, but her mind was far away, lost in forbidden thoughts. Max, indifferent to the latent tensions, was devouring his cereal, his eyes glued to the latest volume of his favorite comic. "Mom, do you think Superman could beat Spider-Man?" Max asked innocently. Maggie chuckled lightly. "I think it depends on the day, dear." Tony's phone rang, breaking the morning idyll. He frowned as he read the name on the display, Madison General Hospital. Without a word, he answered, hearing the emergency report from the other side of the line. Maggie silently watched Tony's detachment, which, while justified by his work, seemed to widen the abyss between them. She looked at her son, the only anchor that kept her there. The doorbell rang, and Christina, Maggie's best friend, appeared with a smile on her face and contagious energy. She brought a breath of fresh air to that house of pre-established routines. "Ready for yoga class, Maggie?" she asked enthusiastically. Maggie nodded, throwing one last look at Tony, who had already rushed off to the hospital. She grabbed her gym bag and walked out the door, ready for a respite from the life she was becoming increasingly uncomfortable living. Max waved at her, completely oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. Christina and Maggie left the yoga studio in the heart of Madison. The afternoon light bathed the city streets with nostalgic beauty. Christina looked at Maggie, noticing her friend's unusual silence. She was used to laughing and sharing the happenings of their lives after yoga classes. "Maggie, is everything okay? You seem a bit distant today," Christina observed, her tone cautious. Maggie sighed deeply, as if carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She looked at Christina with eyes full of sorrow and regret. "Christina, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice trembling. Christina felt a knot in her stomach. "Of course, Mags. What's going on?" Maggie took a deep breath, her words seeming to get stuck in her throat. I'm seeing someone who isn't Tony." The silence that followed was deafening. Christina widened her eyes, trying to absorb the information. "Who is he, Maggie?" she asked, trying to remain calm. "Andrew," Maggie murmured. "Andrew Clark." "Andrew Clark?" Maggie's ex-boyfriend, the man with whom she shared her first love and her first heartbreaks. Christina remembered him all too well. "Andrew? But why?" I don't know, Christina," Maggie confessed, tears welling up in her eyes. "I just know that I can't stop thinking about him. He makes me feel alive in a way that Tony hasn't for a long time." Christina felt a wave of despair hearing Maggie's words. She took her friend's hands, seeking to offer some comfort. "Maggie, you have a husband who loves you, a wonderful son. Do you really want to throw all that away for a crush?" Maggie withdrew her hands, looking at Christina with a look of determination. "Christina, I love Tony, I love Max, but I'm not happy, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Christina shook her head, incredulous. "Maggie, you need to think about this. Don't make a hasty decision that could ruin your life and Max's." But Maggie just shook her head. I've made my decision, Christina. I'm going to leave Tony. I'm going to be with Andrew." And with those words, Christina's world turned upside down. She looked at her friend, hoping she would change her mind, but all she saw in Maggie's eyes was resolution. Night fell over the city of Madison, wrapping the Whitman house in a foreboding quiet. Max lay on his bed, lost in the world of comic book heroes. When Maggie silently entered his room, she watched him, her heart tight with impending pain. "Mom, are you okay?" Max asked, noticing the heavy expression on Maggie's face. "I am, sweetheart," Maggie assured, forcing a smile. "Just came to say good night." She kissed him on the forehead, suppressing a sob. "I love you, Max." Max smiled sleepily. "I love you too, Mom." After leaving Max's room, Maggie walked to Tony's office. There, she left a note on the desk, a simple but devastating message. With a final look at the house she once called home, Maggie left through the door, her chest heavy with the weight of her choices. The next morning, Tony found the house silent. "Maggie," he called, but there was no response. Maggie's absence filled the house like a ghost. When he found the note, his world crumbled. It read, "Tony, I'm sorry. I need to follow my heart. I love you, but not the way I should. Please take care of Max." Maggie. Tony felt a devouring void settle in his chest. He looked at the note, Maggie's familiar handwriting seeming strange and foreign now. Max walked into the office, his face curious. "Dad, where's Mom?" Tony swallowed hard. "Max, we need to talk." Christina was preparing breakfast when the phone rang. On the display, Tony's name appeared with a terrible foreboding. She answered. Tony's voice on the other side was filled with pain and fury. "Why didn't you tell me, Christina?" he growled, his words barely coming out. "Tony, you knew, didn't you? Knew that Maggie was cheating on me and didn't tell me?" The accusation hit Christina like a punch in the stomach. "Tony, I'm sorry. I tried to convince her not to. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore." Tony's voice was broken. Christina felt her heart squeeze. "She's gone, Christina. Maggie's gone." With those words, Christina's world collapsed. She heard the sound of the call being terminated, leaving her alone with the pain of a shattered friendship and the prospect of an uncertain future. The sun was setting when Tony sat on the garden swing, Maggie's note still in his hands. He watched Max playing in the garden, trying to keep his composure. He knew he couldn't let his son see how devastated he was. As he watched Max, Tony couldn't help but be swallowed by memories of his own childhood. He remembered the day his mother, Martha, left him. She had also left just a note. He was only 7 at the time, but the pain of that day never left his heart. His mind returned to the face of his father, a man once full of life, fading into a shadow of himself with each sip of alcohol. Life lost color for Tony's father, and he drowned in drink to forget the reality of being abandoned by the woman he loved. In his darkest moments, it was Tony's grandmother who stood by his side, raising him with all the love and care she could offer. Tony's grandmother was a strong woman who never let adversity shake her faith in life. Tony remembered all the times his grandmother held him while he cried, all the times she promised him things would get better, the stories she told to help him fall asleep, the songs she sang to calm him. Watching Max now, Tony knew he had to be strong for his son. He had to be the rock that Max could lean on, just as his grandmother had been for him. "Max," Tony called, his voice firm despite the sadness he felt. "Come here, please." Max ran to him, his eyes bright with innocence. "Yes, Dad." Tony pulled him into a tight hug, promising himself that he would do everything in his power to protect Max from the pain he himself had faced. He would confront the demons of his past to ensure a better future for his son. "I love you, Max," Tony said, holding his son close to him. And I will always be here for you, always. Max smiled, hugging Tony back. I love you too, Dad. As the sun set, Tony made a silent promise to himself. No matter what happened, he would be the father Max needed, and together they would find a path through the storm. 7 years of pain and scars, of growth and resilience. Tony had transformed into a strong man, a dedicated father, and a competent doctor. He and Max had built a new life together, finding joy in the simplicity of their family routine. Max, now a teenager, had become the image of his father, intelligent, kind, and resilient. On that fateful day, Tony's temporary transfer to Madison Women's Prison led him down a path he never thought he would cross. When he was called to attend an elderly prisoner who was unwell, he could never have imagined who he would find. She was lying in bed, her white hair spread out on the pillow, her eyes closed. Her face, though marked by time and suffering, still possessed traces of the woman Tony remembered. He felt his heart stop. It was Martha, his mother, Martha Whitman. The nurse informed, passing the medical record to him. Tony stared at the woman who once abandoned him. What? How? He couldn't form the words. She has been sick for some time, the nurse explained, noticing Tony's shocked expression. Do you know her? Tony swallowed hard, his emotions a whirlwind of surprise, anger, and sadness. She's my mother. The nurse looked surprised. Oh, doctor, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Tony approached the bed, his heart heavy. He remembered the last time he saw her, still a child, the woman who left him without looking back. And now there she was, frail and ill. I'll take care of her, Tony finally said. The nurse nodded and left the room, leaving mother and son alone. Martha, Tony called, his voice choked. Martha's eyes opened, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. I'm Tony. Martha seemed surprised, her eyes filling with tears. Tony. She extended her hand, and Tony reluctantly took it. At that moment, memories of an abandoned childhood and the harsh reality of prison merged into a single echo from the past. Tony found himself caring for Martha, just like he did with so many patients before. But this time, it was personal. And despite everything, Tony promised he would do his best to help Martha in her final days. Not for her, but for himself, to make peace with his past. In the days that followed, Tony found himself torn between his regular job and his visits to Martha. The task of caring for his mother was hard, but he was determined to do it. During his visits, he began to learn more about the woman his mother had become and the tragic sequence of events that led her to prison. It was on a rainy afternoon that Martha, with a distant look and a trembling voice, began to tell her story. She talked about the man who came into her life after she had left her family behind. He was charming and promised her a life of love and happiness. I was naive, Tony, Martha confessed, her voice shaking. I just wanted love, and he promised me that. But he was a scam artist. Martha recounted how he wrapped her up in his schemes without her realizing it, used her identity to carry out several scams, and when they were discovered, he managed to escape, leaving Martha to take all the blame. I tried to prove my innocence, Tony, Martha sobbed, but nobody believed me. He was too smart, too careful. He planned everything so that I would be the only one to blame. Tony felt a wave of anger against the man who had further destroyed his mother's life. But looking at Martha, all he felt was deep sadness. As much as he had reasons to resent her, he couldn't help but feel pity for the tragic fate she had faced. I'm sorry, Mom, Tony murmured, holding Martha's hand. I'm sorry for everything. In the days that followed, Tony did everything in his power to ensure that Martha's final moments were comfortable. He couldn't change the past, he couldn't reverse the injustice his mother had suffered. But he could make sure she knew that despite everything, there was still someone who cared about her. And in the quiet of the prison, between the cold of the corridors and the desperation of the glances around, Tony and Martha found a strange kind of reconciliation. A silent understanding that united them despite the scars of the past. The clock on the hospital wall marked 3:47. Tony was sitting next to Martha's bed, holding her hand. The heart monitors played the constant and peaceful music of life fading away. Martha breathed heavily, each breath seeming to suck all the effort out of her body. Her face was serene, the wrinkles around her eyes and mouth appearing less severe under the dim light. She opened her eyes, meeting Tony's gaze. He squeezed her hand, a gesture of comfort that seemed so small in the face of the approaching end. "Tony," she murmured, her voice weak but clear. "My boy, I've always been so proud of you." A tear rolled down Tony's face. He leaned over her, his heart heavy with the imminence of farewell. "I'm sorry, Mom," he murmured. "I'm sorry for everything." With a final breath, Martha squeezed Tony's hand and closed her eyes. The heart monitor beeped, the line flattening into a constant tone. The on-duty nurse entered the room, silenced the monitor, and placed her hand on Tony's shoulder. "Doctor," she murmured, her voice full of sympathy, "I'm sorry." Alone with his now silent mother, Tony allowed himself to cry. The pain of loss hit him like a wave, flooding his heart. He cried for the mother he had lost again, for the injustice she had suffered, and for the time they never had. In the days that followed, Tony found himself navigating the sea of grief with a strange sense of calm. The pain was there, yes, but there was also a sort of acceptance. He had lost his mother, but he also had gained something, a deeper understanding of life's fragility and the importance of reconciliation. He couldn't change the past, he couldn't bring Martha back. But he could live his life in a way that honored the lessons she left him. And with that promise in his heart, Tony said goodbye to his mother and looked to the future with new determination. 3 years after Martha's death, the morning sun poured its soft light onto Tony's house, where tranquility resided in an almost tangible manner. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the living room, and the sound of birds harmonized, the perfect setting for a new day. However, this communion was about to be shattered. At the door, a familiar but utterly unexpected figure outlined itself against the sunlight, Maggie. Her pulse quickened, playing a nervous symphony in her ears as she raised a trembling hand to knock on the door of the house she once called home. Tony's face, when he opened the door, was a mix of surprise and dismay, as if he'd seen a ghost from the past. His gaze traced Maggie's familiar features, albeit more worn by the years and marked by regret. "Maggie," disbelief colored his voice, his heart beating an alarmed rhythm in his chest. "Why? Why are you here?" Her voice was like a low murmur, laden with unspoken emotions. "Tony," she swallowed hard, her eyes pleading for understanding, "I need to talk to you. I've been reflecting on a lot of things, about the mistake I made. Andrew, he wasn't the person I thought he was." A deep sadness clouded Tony's eyes, like a dark cloud obscuring the sun. He felt as though a weight had been placed on his shoulders, a burden he thought he had left behind a decade ago. "Maggie," his voice sounded graver, the words escaping him like a lament, "that was 10 years ago." The statement made him seem even more distant in her eyes. Maggie looked at Tony, her face stained with tears, and a confession escaped her lips. "I know," she admitted, a sense of despair making her voice tremble, "but Tony, I miss you. I miss us, Max, I want to come back." And there they were, on opposite sides of the same door, a decade of separation between them, the past resurging abruptly on a morning that should have been peaceful. Before Tony could reply, the door opened again, and Christina appeared, her pregnant belly clearly visible. "Honey, what's going on?" she asked, confused. Maggie froze, surprise and fury shining in her eyes. "Christina," she hissed, turning to Tony, you and her?" "Christina and I are married, Maggie," Tony said, his voice firm. She's been a mother to Max. We've had a beautiful daughter, Lisa, and she's pregnant with little Calvin. You had no right, Maggie screamed, pointing at Christina. You had no right to steal my family. You abandoned this family. Maggie, Tony retorted, his voice filled with contained anger. You had left. Christina filled the void you left. Before Maggie could reply, the house door opened again, and Max came out, a handsome 18-year-old young man, looking at the scene in confusion. Mom, he asked, looking at Maggie without recognition. Max, Maggie whispered, heartbroken. Max, come in, Tony ordered, his voice firm. Max obeyed, casting one last confused look at Maggie before entering the house. Maggie turned to Tony, her eyes wide. He doesn't remember me. Tony shook his head, his expression stern. Christina is his mother now, Maggie, and I want you to leave. Devastated, Maggie stepped back, tears streaming down her face. Without saying a word, she turned and left, leaving behind the life she had once abandoned. And there you have it, my friends. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.